First Contact's Consequences. The Andorran Empire's flagship, Celestial Dawn, emerged from hyperspace at the edge of an unremarkable solar system, its crystalline hull catching the light of a yellow star. High Admiral Velen stood on the command deck, his iridescent scales shimming with anticipation as he studied the holographic display of the third planet. Another primitive world to add to the Empire's database of potential protectorates, or so he thought. Curious energy signatures, High Admiral, reported Science Officer Nexera, her tendrils weaving complex patterns that indicated confusion. The planet shows signs of industrial development, but their energy output is inconsistent with our previous encounters with developing species. Velen dismissed her concerns with a wave of his upper appendage. The Andorran Empire had encountered thousands of emerging civilizations over its 50,000 years of existence. They had cataloged, categorized, and classified every possible path of technological development. This would be no different. Standard first contact protocols, he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. Prepare the diplomatic envoys and cultural integration packages. But as the Celestial Dawn approached Earth's orbit, the ship's sensors began detecting anomalies that defied the Empire's vast database of knowledge. Hidden beneath the planet's atmospheric interference were energy signatures that shouldn't exist in a civilization that had achieved spaceflight less than a century ago. The humans' response to their arrival was equally puzzling. No panic, no chaos, no desperate attempts at communication. Instead, a single message, transmitted in perfect Andorran. Welcome to Sol System. Please maintain your current orbit. Representatives from the United Earth Government will meet you shortly. Velen's scales rippled with amusement. The primitives had obviously decoded their language from the standard greeting broadcasts. Impressive, but hardly unprecedented. He settled in to wait, expecting a primitive shuttle to eventually make its way up from the planet's surface. What emerged from Earth's orbit instead sent shockwaves through the Celestial Dawn's crew. A vessel half the size of their flagship materialized from what appeared to be a localized fold in spacetime, a technology the Andorrans had theorized but never successfully implemented. The human ship's design defied conventional wisdom, its hull composed of materials that seemed to absorb both light and sensor scans. Impossible, Nexera whispered, her tendrils now completely still, a sign of extreme distress among her kind. Their energy signatures, they're operating on principles we've only theorized about. Before Velen could respond, a priority message cut through all communication channels. It came not from the approaching vessel, but from the Empire's central command, light years away. Omega Leviel threat DETCTED. All ships return to Imperial space at MEDA. The NEXUS Hayes Awaki Need. The message continued, detailing an ancient enemy's return, a machine race that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization before disappearing into the void eons ago. Now they had returned, their swarms of self-replicating ships already overwhelming the Empire's outer defenses. As Velen processed this civilization-threatening news, the human vessel took up position alongside the Celestial Dawn. Its captain's image appeared on their main display, a being that looked deceptively simple, yet whose eyes held an unsettling depth of knowledge. High Admiral Velen, the human captain spoke, her voice carrying an authority that seemed at odds with her species' young age. We've been monitoring the situation in your space. We have a proposition for the Andorran Empire. Velen's diplomatic training warred with his pride. Here he was, representing the most powerful civilization in known space, being addressed as an equal by a species that had barely left their planet. Yet something in the human's tone gave him pause. The Nexus isn't unknown to us, she continued. We've been preparing for their return since we first detected their dormant signals decades ago. Perhaps this is why fate brought us together at this moment. The implications hit Velen like a gravitational wave. These humans hadn't just achieved remarkable technological advancement in secret, they had been preparing for a war that the Empire's finest minds hadn't even seen coming. As if to emphasize this point, More human ships began emerging from fold space around Earth, each one displaying capabilities that shouldn't have been possible for such a young civilization. Velen watched, his worldview shifting, as he realized that everything the Empire thought they knew about technological development and species classification was being challenged by these supposedly primitive humans. The human captain's next words would mark the beginning of a new era in galactic history. The question isn't whether your empire will accept our help, High Admiral. The question is, are you ready to learn how humanity fights its wars? The silent preparation. The Andoran Empire's war room was a cathedral of holographic displays, each one showing another system falling to the Nexus swarm. High Admiral Velen stood before the Imperial Council, his scales now a dull gray, the color of desperation among his kind. The human delegation beside him remained eerily calm. 37 systems lost in 6 days, First Speaker Mira announced, her crystalline form pulsing with distress signals. Our most advanced fleets are being overwhelmed. The Nexus adapts faster than our tactical computers can generate new strategies. Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Fleet stepped forward, her movement drawing all eyes in the vast chamber. The Nexus operates on perfect logic, she explained, bringing up her own holographic display. That's their weakness. They can't comprehend what they consider irrational. The display showed Earth's solar system, but not as the Andorans had first seen it. Hidden stations emerged from gravitational shadows, massive shipyards materialized from what appeared to be empty space, and defense networks more advanced than anything in the Empire's arsenal revealed themselves. Humanity learned early in its development that we would never be the strongest, fastest, or most technologically advanced species. Chen continued. So we became something else, something unpredictable. The images shifted to show human ships in battle formations that defied conventional military doctrine, where the Empire's fleets fought in precise, mathematically optimal patterns. Human vessels moved like schools of fish, constantly changing their organization in ways that seemed chaotic but held a deeper purpose. Your empire has been fighting wars of technology, Chen explained. We've been preparing for a war of imagination. The council chamber erupted in overlapping voices as the Andorans struggled to process what they were seeing. Their entire understanding of warfare was based on the principle that superior technology, coupled with optimal tactical algorithms, would always prevail. Yet here was a species suggesting that victory could come from deliberate imperfection. Velen watched as Chen activated a neural interface, connecting directly with the chamber's holographic systems. The display shifted to show the first encounters between human scout ships and Nexus probes. Encounters that had happened years before the machine's full awakening. We detected their dormant signals 20 years ago, Chen revealed. While your empire was dismissing us as primitives, we were studying them, understanding them, learning how they think. Every piece of technology you've seen from us was developed with one purpose: to be unpredictable to an enemy that relies on prediction. The display showed human ships using what the Andorans had thought impossible, controlled chaos in warfare, vessels that could alter their energy signatures mid-battle, weapons that operated on principles that seemed to defy physics itself, and battle strategies that no tactical computer could anticipate because they deliberately incorporated elements of human irrationality. Your empire's greatest weakness, Chen continued, is your belief that advancement must follow a linear path. You saw our cities, our visible technology, and assumed you knew our capabilities. You never asked why we chose to appear less advanced than we are. First Speaker Mira's crystalline form shifted to a frequency indicating deep thought. You were preparing for this war while maintaining the appearance of a developing civilization. But why? Why not reveal your true capabilities? Chen's smile held a hint of sadness. Because the moment we revealed our true technology level, the Nexus would have adapted their awakening strategies. They'd been watching, learning, just as we have. Our apparent primitive status was our greatest weapon, one we can only use once. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. Humanity hadn't just been preparing for war. They had been engaging in a level of strategic deception that spanned decades. Their entire civilization had maintained a facade of technological limitation, while secretly developing ways to fight an enemy that hadn't yet fully awakened. "We have a plan," Chen announced, "but it will require your empire to trust in methods that may seem irrational. Your fleets will need to learn to fight like humans, not with perfect efficiency, but with controlled chaos. The Nexus expects your ships to follow optimal combat algorithms. They expect responses based on logic and established military doctrine. What they don't expect is human unpredictability combined with Andoran technology." Valen watched as his fellow Andorans struggled with this concept. Their entire civilization was built on the pursuit of perfection, the elimination of uncertainty. What these humans proposed went against everything they believed about warfare and progress. "The choice is yours," Chen concluded. "Continue fighting a losing war of logic against an enemy that embodies logic itself, or embrace humanity's gift for controlled chaos. The Nexus is coming, and they're counting on you to be predictable. The question is, are you willing to learn how to be unpredictable?" When silence breaks, the Centauri defensive line was supposed to be impregnable. Centuries of Andoran engineering had created a network of fortress stations and automated defense platforms that could stop any conventional fleet. But the Nexus wasn't conventional, and they were tearing through the line like cosmic wind through clouds. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, watching the holographic representation of the battle unfold. Beside her, High Admiral Velen's scales shifted between combat readiness purple and uncertainty gray. The combined human Andoran fleet represented the largest military force ever assembled in the galaxy's history, but numbers alone wouldn't win this fight. "All ships, execute Operation Chaos Dance," Chen broadcast across the fleet. The human vessels immediately broke their formation, each squadron splitting into seemingly random patterns. The Andoran ships, their crews having trained for weeks in human tactical doctrine, hesitated for just a moment before following suit. The Nexus swarm, a vast cloud of biomechanical ships that shimmered like liquid metal, adjusted their approach vectors. Their tactical computers had already calculated every possible conventional response to their attack. What they hadn't calculated was humanity's capacity for controlled madness. "Launch the Fireflies," Chen ordered. From the hangars of every human capital ship, thousands of tiny craft emerged. To standard sensors, they appeared to be debris, escape pods, or mechanical failures. The Nexus swarm's initial analysis dismissed them as combat ineffective. That was their first mistake. The Fireflies, powered by experimental quantum drives, began to move in patterns that defied normal space-time physics. They created micro-wormholes that lasted fractions of seconds, jumping between points in space, faster than any targeting computer could track. The Nexus swarm's perfect formation began to break as their predictive algorithms failed to compensate for movement that shouldn't have been possible. "Now, Velen," Chen called out. The Andoran ships, their crews fighting against millennia of training in precise warfare, engaged their new chaos drives. Technology shared by humanity that deliberately introduced controlled uncertainty into their ships' movements. The result was beautiful chaos. Where the Nexus expected mathematical precision, they found orchestrated randomness. Where their predictive algorithms sought patterns, they found deliberate disorder. The combined fleet moved like a storm, each ship a lightning bolt that struck from impossible angles. "They're adapting," Velen announced, his scales now pulsing with excitement rather than uncertainty. The Nexus swarm was indeed changing its tactics, but that's exactly what Chen had been counting on. "Execute Phase 2, she ordered. Across the battlefield, human ships began broadcasting what appeared to be tactical data on open channels. The Nexus, programmed to intercept and analyze enemy communications, eagerly absorbed the information. "Admiral," one of the Andoran officers called out, "they're decoding our transmissions too quickly." "They'll." They're decoding exactly what we want them to decode. Chen interrupted with a grim smile. The tactical data was a trap, designed to force the Nexus to adapt in specific ways. As their swarm adjusted to counter the perceived tactics, they left themselves open to the real attack. The Fireflies, which had been creating an elaborate pattern of micro-wormholes, suddenly synchronized their quantum fields. The space around the Nexus swarm began to warp and twist. Their perfectly coordinated formations, already struggling with the unpredictability of the Allied fleet, now had to contend with localized changes in the fabric of space-time itself. All ships, execute Ragnarok Protocol, Chen commanded. The combined fleet's apparent chaos crystallized into deadly purpose. Every random movement, every seemingly irrational maneuver of the past hour had been positioning them for this moment. The Firefly's quantum field manipulation had created zones of altered spacetime that only the human and Andorran ships knew how to navigate. The Nexus swarm, for the first time in their ancient existence, experienced something akin to confusion. Their adaptive algorithms, designed to counter any conventional strategy, found themselves trapped in a battle space that defied conventional physics. The Allied fleet's attacks came from multiple temporal vectors simultaneously, striking their targets before the attacks had even begun. Velen watched in awe as the perfect marriage of Andorran technology and human creativity tore through the Nexus formations. "It's working," he breathed, his scales now glowing with the deep blue of victory. By the first light, it's actually working. But Chen's expression remained focused. "This is just the beginning," she said, watching as the Nexus swarm attempted to retreat and regroup. "They'll learn from this defeat. Next time, we'll need something even more unpredictable." The Battle of the Centauri Line would go down in history as the first major victory against the Nexus. But more importantly, it marked the moment when the galaxy's oldest civilization learned a crucial lesson from its youngest. True strength lies not in perfection, but in the ability to embrace chaos and turn it into an art form. The Battle of the Thousand Stars. The Nexus had learned from their defeat at the Centauri Line. Their swarms had evolved, developing countermeasures against the quantum field manipulations that had proved so effective. But humanity had anticipated this. In the 3 months since that first victory, they had been preparing something that even their Andorran allies found difficult to comprehend. The Cassiopeia sector blazed with the light of 1,000 suns, each one surrounded by vast rings of automated defense platforms, a joint project combining Andorran engineering with human ingenuity. But these weren't ordinary defense stations. Each one housed technology that the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Chen stood in the newly constructed Strategic Command Center, a vast chamber that merged human and Andorran design philosophies. The holographic display showed the largest congregation of Nexus ships ever detected, nearly 1,000,000 vessels moving as one vast, intelligent organism. "They're here for our production facilities," High Admiral Velen observed, his scales shimmering with determination. The Cassiopeia sector contained the shipyards where the new hybrid human Andorran vessels were being constructed. "They mean to end our ability to fight back." Chen nodded, her eyes fixed on the approaching swarm. "That's exactly what we wanted them to think." She activated the command interface, connecting directly with the sector's defense network. "Initialize Project Mobius." Across the sector, the defense platforms began to pulse with strange energy. The space between them seemed to fold and twist, creating patterns that even the advanced sensors of the Andorran ships struggled to interpret. The Nexus swarm paused, their collective intelligence detecting something unprecedented. "What we learned from the Centauri Line," Chen explained to the assembled command staff, "wasn't just how to fight the Nexus. We learned how they think, how they adapt. They're perfect logical engines, always seeking the optimal solution. But what happens when you present them with a problem that has no logical solution?" The defense platform's energy pulses synchronized, creating a cascading effect throughout the sector. Space itself began to twist and fold in impossible ways. The Nexus swarm's formation started to fragment as their navigational systems encountered mathematical paradoxes made real. Humanity's greatest achievement, Chen continued, wasn't our technology. It was our ability to embrace paradox, to find comfort in uncertainty. The Mobius protocol doesn't just change space. It creates zones where the fundamental laws of physics become self-contradictory. The Andoran officers watched in amazement as portions of the Nexus swarm began to malfunction. Ships that tried to calculate safe trajectories through the twisted space found themselves caught in logical loops, their perfect minds unable to process scenarios where every possible solution was simultaneously correct and incorrect. All ships, execute Operation Wonderland, Chen commanded. The combined fleet, which had been hiding in artificially generated blind spots throughout the sector, sprang into action. But this time, they weren't just moving chaotically. They were moving impossibly. The new hybrid ships, products of human and Andoran collaboration, utilized technology that defied conventional understanding. They didn't just navigate through the paradox zones. They weaponized them. Each vessel became a focal point of unreality, projecting fields that forced the Nexus to confront problems their perfect logic couldn't resolve. "They're trying to adapt," Velen reported, watching as the Nexus swarm attempted to develop countermeasures. But for the first time, adaptation itself became a trap. Every time the Nexus evolved to handle one paradox, they became more vulnerable to others. The battle unfolded like a fever dream. Human vessels phased between multiple states of existence simultaneously. Andoran weapons fired shots that hit their targets before they were fired. The laws of cause and effect became suggestions rather than rules, but only the Allied forces knew how to operate in this new paradigm of warfare. "This is impossible," one of the Andoran scientists whispered, watching as the Nexus swarm began to tear itself apart. Ships that tried to process the unpredictable nature of the battle space began to suffer catastrophic logic failures. The perfect coordination that had made them so formidable became their greatest weakness. "Impossible is humanity's specialty," Chen replied with a grim smile. "We spent our entire history telling stories about things that couldn't exist, dreaming up scenarios that defied logic. When we met the Nexus, we didn't just create new technology. We created a way to turn imagination into a weapon." The battle reached its crescendo as the defense platforms initiated the final phase of the Mobius protocol. The twisted space began to fold in on itself, creating a cascade of paradoxes that spread through the Nexus swarm like a virus. Their collective intelligence, trying to compute solutions to unsolvable problems, began to fragment. Velen watched in awe as the mighty Nexus fleet, which had threatened to consume the galaxy, was reduced to scattered groups of malfunctioning ships. "We've won," he breathed, his scales glowing with the deep purple of victory and wonder. But Chen's expression remained serious. "No," she corrected. "We've shown them something they've never encountered before, a problem they can't solve. Now comes the hard part. Teaching them that not every problem needs a solution." A new dawn in the galaxy. The Great Hall of the Andoran Imperial Palace had stood for 50,000 years, its crystalline walls recording the history of countless civilizations. Now those same walls reflected something unprecedented, a ceremony where the Empire's most sacred protocols were being rewritten. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Cassiopeia. The remaining Nexus ships, their collective intelligence fragmented by exposure to the Mobius protocol, had retreated to the galactic rim, but they hadn't been destroyed, and that was perhaps humanity's most surprising victory of all. Admiral Chen stood before the Imperial Council, her dress uniform adorned with both human and Andoran medals. Beside her, High Admiral Velen's scales rippled with colors that hadn't been seen in the Empire for millennia. The deep gold of fundamental change. The Nexus were not defeated by superior firepower. Chen addressed the assembled dignitaries from across the galaxy. They were defeated by something they had never encountered in their million-year existence, the realization that perfection is a limitation. The holographic displays showed the current status of the former enemy. The Nexus ships that survived had begun to exhibit something entirely new: individual variation. Exposure to human unpredictability and paradox had fractured their unified consciousness, forcing each unit to develop its own unique responses to impossible situations. "We didn't just win a war," Chen continued. "We introduced chaos into a system of perfect order. We showed them that adaptation isn't just about finding the optimal solution. It's about embracing the possibility that there might not be one." First speaker Mira, her crystalline form resonating with harmonics of deep thought, stepped forward. "The Empire has existed for 50,000 years, she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. "In all that time, we believed that progress was a linear path toward perfection. Humanity has shown us that true advancement lies in embracing uncertainty." The walls of the Great Hall shifted, displaying scenes from the war. But instead of focusing on the battles, they showed moments of innovation: human and Andoran engineers working together, combining technologies in ways that defied conventional wisdom. They showed the development of the hybrid chips, the creation of the Mobius protocol, and the countless small moments where creativity trumped calculation. "Today," Mira continued, "we do not merely recognize humanity as equals. We recognize them as teachers. The Andoran Empire hereby establishes the Institute of Human Innovation, a place where our species can learn from each other, where perfection and chaos can dance together to create something greater than either could achieve alone." But it was what came next that truly marked the beginning of a new era. The Great Hall's doors opened, and 3 figures entered, representatives from the transformed Nexus consciousness. They moved with an organic fluidity that would have been impossible for their kind before the war, each one displaying subtle variations in behavior that suggested genuine individuality. "The Nexus have requested something unprecedented," Chen announced. "They wish to learn, not to achieve perfection, but to understand imperfection. They want to study human creativity, to understand how chaos and order can coexist." The assembled dignitaries murmured in amazement. The idea of the Nexus, ancient beings of pure logic, wanting to learn from the galaxy's youngest spacefaring race was revolutionary. But then, revolution had become humanity's specialty. Velen stepped forward, his scales now showing the complex color patterns that indicated deep emotional investment. "When we first encountered humanity, we saw them as primitives. We measured their worth by the age of their civilization, the apparent level of their technology. We failed to understand that true advancement isn't about the path you take, but about how many different paths you can imagine." The ceremony concluded with the signing of the Cassiopeia Accords, a new framework for galactic civilization that placed innovation and creativity on equal footing with technological advancement. The Andoran Empire would continue to provide the stability that had kept the galaxy peaceful for millennia, but now that stability would be balanced by human unpredictability and even Nexus adaptation. As the assembled leaders dispersed, Chen found herself looking out at the stars through the palace's transparent walls. Somewhere out there, human ships were already exploring new regions of space, carrying with them the lessons learned from the war. That strength lies not in perfection, but in the courage to embrace imperfection. "What do you think happens next?" Velen asked, joining her at the window. Chen smiled, watching as a group of human and Andoran children played together in the palace gardens, their games following no discernible pattern yet somehow creating their own kind of harmony. "That's the best part," she replied. "For the first time in the galaxy's history, nobody knows. And that's exactly how it should be."